So today we have a special guest. People are missing this out. If you guys are playing Sork, they're missing out a good opportunity over here. Thankful to Lust Boy. Having known so many uh, skill players. We have someone named Looter. He is one of the best DPS players in the server. For example, remember have I shown you guys yesterday about the Challenge Guardian? This is the hardest content as of now in Korea. There's not that many clear rates for this. And if you press this button over here, the trophy, you have this over here. We have interviewed Nare last time, right? For the lowest time, the fastest time clear. This means their DPS is out of this world. Now, for this particular Sorceress player, he knows a lot about the Sorceress. He knows how to do all the cool tips. And then you guys have Bro Shaza coming out as well. You have all those tips ready to go. For this case, we're talking about the Sorceress itself. I looked at some of the questions from the Discord already. I'm looking into it and I compiled it. And within the thought process of it, this video, this interview itself is not going to be for newbie players. For newbie players, I have another video on YouTube that covers the builds, that covers the existing builds, and how Sorceress perform. This video is for advanced players who are Sorceress mains and who is going to try to excel at doing DPS at, preferably like Inferno content and further contents and beyond to min-max it out, right? So this is for advanced people. So this falls into a category of people who are maining Sork, who has a lot of passion on Sork. It may be one of the probably very honored to talk to this guy because he knows a lot about his stuff, even though he's very humble, saying like, oh, I don't know, there's much to do, but he has brought a lot of stuff for us to give you guys the best tips of how we can DPS really well.
저 같은 경우 로스타크에서 한국 서버에서 11캐릭을 키우고 있는데 전부 다 딜러만 키우고 있어요. 서포터는 취향이 너무 안 맞아가지고
So he has 11 characters. He plays 11 DPS characters, all at around 1600 eye level. That's pretty crazy. And he has said that he has tried supporter out. He tried support, but it wasn't his play style. So he didn't feel like playing supporter at all. So his main thought process was playing DPS classes only. So he's like one of those big DPS enjoyers. He's also very humble. He has said that he doesn't think that he is as good as he thinks, but that's a fun thing. I think he's one of the best players. Even Lustboy himself has said that he is probably one of the best players I've ever seen. If Lustboy said that, that's pretty impressive because Lustboy has never said I was good at this game yet. He said that. He said Lustboy, he compliments a lot, and then I told him, oh, maybe I'm just bad, or if he's just complimenting him a lot because he's actually that good.
캐릭터가 어려운 게 아니고 레이드의 숙련도가 아직 낮으셔서 캐릭터가 어려운 것처럼 보이는 거라서 소서리스는 굉장히 쉬운 편이고 쉬운데도 딜이 굉장히 잘 나오는 클래스라서 저는 굉장히 추천드리고 싶어요.
So the question was about the Sorceress itself, as in the recommendation, and then the some that is not recommended is for the recommended section. The Sorceress character, the class itself is very easy. You have two classes. You have Ignition and you have Reflux. He plays both of them. And based upon other classes, as if the other class, the 11 classes he has played until the end game, this particular two classes, the classing of the play styles are very, very good. Like as in, they're easy to play. And considering how easier it is to play, the DPS itself is super high. So it would be like a low risk, high return class. And as for some people were wondering, oh wait, but what about Sork seems to be a little hard. I wonder, it's like if they feel that it's hard, usually this is a case of the player itself being not used to the raid, as in they're not used to dodging raid mechanics, focusing on the raid boss itself. That's probably the only reason why the particular class feels weird, but the class itself is one of the easiest to do the most damage on. As for the not recommended section for this particular class is if you guys are interested in cooperation in raids, as in countering, doing mechanics together, working as a team, this class is not recommended. This class itself has no meaning of corporation within it. As in, you have to play the opposite word for it is selfish, but he has not said selfish. But to give you guys a better description, your job is to do DPS. It's a cruel fight. You guys know the cruel fighter behavior. So it's for those type of players that their job is to be solo playing, doing all the DPS, not worrying about all that stuff. But if you're actually a player who wants to play as a team and help out and do mechanics and cooperate as a raid, this is not the class for you, right? And also, the Ignition class engraving itself, it's very slow. So if you are not used to a slow character, this is definitely not the class for you as well.
저 같은 경우 이 소서리스 스킬 트리에는 굉장히 여러 개가 있는데 보정 레이드가 아닌 비보정 레이드, 일반 레이드 기준으로 설명을 할게요.
Instead of our traditional interview on the class, guys, in this case, a better information for us to have here is I asked them, are there special skill sets that you use? Plus, are there any other special attributes that you want to mention within the Ignition Sorceress itself? So we are going to talk about Ignition Sorceress only. And as for the level of skills, he put all skills to level 12 and having one skill for counter or one skill for destruction or one skill for just utility by itself. Right. So as you can notice here, his style of play is he's putting level 12 on every single skill except one utility skill to maximize the number of skills that he utilizes to do the damage.
이 스킬 트리 같은 경우 실전에서 쓰기가 굉장히 어려워요. 이 마지막 트라이포드 홀딩을 끝까지 유지하면 전방의 힘을 모아 강력한 번개를 추가로 발사한다. 이게 마지막까지 홀딩을 유지해야 이 마지막 추가타가 발생해요. 여기서 데미지는 약한데 점화를 좀 더 자주 키고 싶다 싶으신 분들은 여기다 풍요를 넣고 사용하시면, 근데 이 스킬 트리 같은 경우는 아까 제가 사용했던 그 7개의 마스터 주고 1개 1레벨 주는 스킬 트리보다 총 딜량 부분에서 조금 약한 부분이 있어요. 이 블레이즈라는 스킬이
This particular skill set is the highest amount of DPS when you have Igniter turned on, right? But you guys have seen him talk about the Lightning Bolt, right? So the reason why we talked about the Lightning Bolt is because the Lightning Bolt itself at the third tripod, the voltage boost, it does theoretically do more damage. However, it is not as realistic. Why is it not as realistic? It's because he has shown you guys you will need to land that particular skill for 1.7 seconds with the endpoint too. Because what it does is like, it casts it for 1.7 seconds and then it does another attack to do the big damage, right? In order for you to squeeze that skill in within that quick fight, like, where the raid just go, everyone, like the boss jumps around and everything, it is not as realistic to squeeze all that DPS in. And the second topic was, if you guys happen to want to, hey, I want to use Igniter more. I want to use Igniter more often. What you do is you lower Blaze into 7, and then you get Inferno. And Inferno gives you a lot of meter if you add in the Wealth Rune on top of that. However, the damage itself is much lower than this particular skill right now. Because Blaze at level 2, apparently it does a lot more damage than you think.
이게 점화 소서리스 같은 경우 이 점화 콤보가 한 4가지 정도가 있거든요. 근데
There's 4 different combos for Ignition.
제가 사용하는 건 그 중에서 3개를 상황에 맞춰서 사용을 하는데 시너지 스킬이 안 들어가 있잖아요.
네.
이 상황에서는 종말 쓰면서 블레이즈 하면서 해방을 해요. 평상시에 딜을 하다가 해방을 할 때는 종말, 혹한, 해방, 리액트.
I asked them, so what are some of your skill utilization within the build that you have here? And he said that there are 4 combos as in total, and when you turn on the Ignition on, and then he uses 3 combos, and they're all different in basic, and they're all based on situations. For example, when we're going over the first one, when the boss itself does not have any synergies on, what he does is he casts a Doomsday, and then he casts Blaze, and then he turns the Igniter on. For the second case, when you're just doing a DPS, what you do is you cast Doomsday, you cast Frost Call, you ignite, and then use the esoteric reaction. Those four combos in an order to squeeze it in.
이게 마지막으로 이거는 좀 특수한 상황에서밖에 안 쓰는 콤보인데 스페이스바를 활용한 콤보를 하나 해요.
Oh.
정말 아예 스페 해방.
So for this third case of combo, what he does is, you know, when the boss is stunned and is in a groggy state, you don't have to worry about using a spacebar, right? Because your spacebar is coming back when the boss is after done in the stagger. So what he does is he casts Doomsday, Ice Arrow, cancels the Ice Arrow with the spacebar, and then Ignite. So these three situations are being utilized while he's doing the fight every time.
저는 사용하지 않는데 원래 이게 점화에 리액트가 한 번밖에 안 들어가요. 시퐁이 없으면 9레벨 홍염까지는 되는데 10레벨이 안정적이라서 10레벨부터 사용하시는 게 좋고 리액트에 전설질풍을 넣고 종 리액트하고 해방을 하는 거예요. 이러면은 이제 리액트를 구홍이나 시풍 없이도 두 번이 사용이 가능해요.
Oh, okay. So for another case is a different combination of skill, which isn't applicable to him. The reason why is because he has the level 10 cooldown gem for esoteric reaction. So to make it like very stable, like stable using it, you can use 2 esoteric reaction within 1 ignition. You can't do it if you have lower than level 9 cooldown gem, but you know, level 10 cooldown gem is recommended so that the rotation goes flawlessly, right? But for those of you who do not have level 9 or level 10 cooldown gem, what he recommends is there's another combination of skills that you could use. You put the legendary Galewind rune on the esoteric reaction, so that when you do a combo for Doomsday and before igniting, you cast esoteric reaction and then ignite, so that you can use the second esoteric reaction within the ignition combo itself.
종말의 날을 제외한 다른 스킬들만 사용해서 아덴을 채워야 되는데 그러다 보면 이게 쿨이 안 맞아요. 그 앞에서 무슨 스킬을 써야지 나는 종옥해만 해야지 이게 안 돼요. 그래서 이 앞에서 말한 콤보를 모두 숙지하고 계시는 게 나머지 스킬들이 아덴을 다 채웠다고 가정을 해볼게요.
So another very important tip for you guys is he has shown you 4 different types of combos, right? You should have all these skill combos ready to go. If it's applicable, you use that combo. But if nothing is applicable, and then and you can do DPS on the boss, it is very important. You can just do the Doomsday to ignite, because it is important for you to cycle those ignition skills, because the time that you waste on having the bar ready to go and the skills that you can use, the DPS loss is so great to a point that it does not justify you waiting for having a combination of skills in before the Doomsday and ignition. If that makes sense for you guys.
점화 소서리스 하시는 분들 중에 저처럼 만약에 해방을 하셨을 때 여기서 혹한을 써버리면 이 아덴이 꺼지고 나서 다음 점화를 채우는 시간이 굉장히 느려지거든요.
This is for the players who utilizes high damage gems and low cooldown gems. For example, he has 2 level 10 cooldown gems, obvious for Doomsday and Esoteric Reaction, because we have explained that before, right? But the level 7 gem cooldown, if you happen to be a player that have a level 7 gem cooldown for the 2 other skills that he has, the Ice Arrow and Frost Call. So what's important for you is, remember when you cast Doomsday and during the Doomsday's cooldown, technically you're supposed to fill up your identity gauge back up, and when you cast that next Doomsday, you're supposed to activate your ignition, right? That's like the perfect condensed, efficient way to use your Doomsday for maximum damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask again to show the example again to make you guys understand what he was talking about. 그럼 혹시 그러면 특화를 조금 더 올려서 그 상황을 한 번 더 보여줄 수 있나요?
네. 보통 1800 정도로 맞추시니까 1800 정도로 설정을 하고 해볼게요.
Yeah. Sorry, when you see it this way over here, right? So you utilize all the skills as you see here, right? And then he's done with it, and by the time the second Doomsday comes out, he lands that Doomsday, right? Now, in this case, he's in a situation where he needs to fill up the identity bar until the Doomsday comes back. So, as you guys notice here, the Frost Call versus Doomsday, it has exactly 1 second left, right? They're exactly almost the same. So he's utilizing the skills over here. And then the Frost calls back, fills the rest, casts the Doomsday, and casts Ignite right away. So you see how everything is lined up to, at least to the T? Very, very, very condensed, very, very max damage. Much damage, much wow.
점화 안에 혹한을 써버리면 다음 점화를 채우려면 이 아이스에로나 그 다른 스킬이 한번 더 쿨이 올 때까지 기다려야 되는 상황이 발생을 해버려요. 그 홍염이 낮아버리면.
Right. So if you have a lower level of gem, what happens is if you use the Frost Call within the ignition, you can't use the Frost Call to fill up your identity gauge, correct? So you will be in a situation of waiting on cooldown on either Frost Call or Ice Arrow, which will make you late on Doomsday again, right? Which will make you late on Igniter again, which it delays everything up, and then you'll lose DPS along the way. So if you have a lower level gem on Frost Call, it is very important for you to utilize it correctly to have your most damaging abilities line up with Igniter very, very well.
이 소서리스 DPS의 가장 큰 핵심이 아까 그 두 번째 종날 이후에 이게 24초거든요. 10홈 기준으로 24초인데 24초 안에 아덴을 채울 수 있느냐 없느냐로 하지만 아까도 보셨다시피 아덴을 채우기 위해서 맞춰야 되는 스킬이 그렇게 많지 않아요.
So to continue about the Doomsday, when you have level 10 gem on the Doomsday, you have 24 seconds. So the goal of Sorceress here, Ignition, the goal of Sorceress Ignition, as Xavier explained it in simple terms, is within that 24 seconds, the Doomsday comes back, you have to fill up your identity gauge, right? Why is that important? So when you say filling up that meter, you got Frost Call, and then you have Ice Arrow. So it's very important for you guys to focus on landing that Frost Call and landing that Ice Arrow. You have to land all those Ice Arrows and all those Frost Call, because it's only 2 skills. If you just land those 2 skills together, you won't be as far off. After you use that Doomsday, after you use your Ignition combo and everything, when you're filling up that meter up, within the 24 seconds the next Doomsday cast, you have to land those 2 skills, and you have to land rest of the other skills to make sure that your identity bar is filled up to do your next damage. Because if you don't land your Doomsday without the Ignition combo, that's how much more DPS you lose. And that's how you lose Crow Fighter, guys.
이 캐릭은 사실 캐릭의 숙련도보다 레이드를 얼마나 잘 아느냐가 중요한 캐릭이에요.
You guys remember in the very beginning, he has said the class itself is not hard. It's actually dependent on your expertise in the raid itself. The reason being is because if you guys are experienced in a raid, for example, let's say this Lumerus guy, right? He dashes. Imagine you know where he dashes. Let's say he dashes over here. You would cast that specific skill. You would cast Frost Call, or you would cast Ice Arrow beforehand where he lands, so that you can have all the ticks landed on that particular boss, right? Therefore, you're going to have that much more meter gain and that much more time saved, and you will be able to land your Doomsdays accordingly. Instead of the class mastery, what's more important for you is to master the raid itself. So that's the troublesome part for it. It's not the class mastery. The class mastery part is easy, but if you don't know where the boss is going, you're going to be missing a lot of stuff. Therefore, you'll be lacking a lot of damage. That's why some people say, oh, why is Sorc hard? Why is Sorc so hard? I mean, this is the real point for it.
깨달음이랑 빠준이랑 아덴 수급이 그렇게 큰 차이가 없거든요. 이 깨달음 쓰면 이 정도 차고 빠준을 사용하면 그렇게 큰 차이가 없어요. 큰 차이가 없는데 이
Right. So that's a good question you guys had in chat, because I thought he had it as well. So the reason why he doesn't use Enlightenment is the difference between the meter gain for Enlightenment versus like the cooldown is not that much, and the Ice Arrow itself actually does decent amount of damage, right? So since Esoteric Reaction and Ice Arrow is in a very short cooldown, it is important for you to utilize it and then increase that damage. So overall, the meter gain is not as impacted, so shorter cooldown, results into more damage, plus you'll be able to gain the meter about at the same time as well.
두 번째 종날 오기 전에 아덴을 채울 수 있어서
So what we're going through here is old build when we had less level gems, and also he wanted to add that if you guys are not used to playing such min-max build, this particular build, this build is a lot easier to fill up your meters up by the Doomsday comes back. So with the Inferno. So let's take a look here. So this is your original, the generic ignition combo that you guys always do. And by the time the Doomsday comes back, the second Doomsday and the Igniter, nice. And then he's going to cast. This is the meter gaining time. 17 seconds left to the clock, and then your goal is to fill the meter up, fill your igniter meter up. There you go. He's filling it up, and he doesn't have to worry about missing some of the skills because by the time he has Inferno up, and then he casts Doomsday right away off cooldown, and be able to use ignition.
방금 이게 그 점화 상태에서 혹한의 부름을 썼는데도 속도가 이렇잖아요.
The one before, the reason why it didn't fill up as fast is because he used Frost Call within ignition, right? But he showed you the difference when he used the Frost Call for meter gain. You have so much more additional room for you to fill up your meter for the skills to have your next ignition ready for your next Doomsday. So this is a much safer build for you guys if you guys are not used to the raid maybe. So compared to the last, if you don't have enough raid experience, like as in when you're doing a tripod, etc., this particular build has the best. It's a lot safer. It's a lot more balanced. There's a lot less room for mistakes. However, you have no counter. that's the negative part about this particular skill set.
정말 해방을 했는데 공버프가 없다. 그러면은
좀 더 늦게 들어올 수 있으니까.
네.
So we're going over to more additional tips on like actual live fighting instead of just hitting a bunch of scarecrows, because again, hitting a bunch of scarecrows is not gonna, like, you guys do billions of damage on scarecrow, who cares, right? It has to be the live fight, and we're going over the live fight portion right now. Is when we turn on the ignition, as for explosion and punishing thunder, you can actually what he's saying is it's recommended for you to wait. Why do you need to wait? Is because sometimes the support doesn't give you the buff in time. For example, this particular class is what? You build gauge for 24 seconds, and then you condense all the damage that is required. About 15 seconds, you have to dish out all the damage that you can. So, but if you calculate it inside, the explosion and punishing thunder is going to be casted once anyway. So if he identifies that the buff has not been applied to you, he waits until Doomsday lasting about 3 seconds, even up to that point. He patiently wait, and then when he gets the buff, he uses the explosion and uses the punishing thunder and uses the last Doomsday as well. Because having that buff is super important, because without the buff, the damage difference is very high. Therefore, you don't know which support you're going to play with, right? So because for example, some people, they just go Doomsday, ignition, and then they use casting explosion and punch thunder right away because it's a combo, right? Even though it's a combo, a better player for you to get that min-max, for you to get that max damage, you wait until the support buff comes in, all of them, all the synergy in, then you use your explosion and punching thunder. All that stuff will get stacked up, and then you will end up having more damage damage overall. So as for the filler skills, you can use it in the meantime while you're waiting, because if you wait too much, you won't be able to use all your filler skills too. So what's important is if you notice, the buff is already inside, and then you have like all these 10 seconds ready to go. Obviously, you're gonna use it for the whole combination, right? Because the support's doing really well, giving you the buffs. But if your support's late or etc., you use your filler skills first, and save explosion and punch thunder at the very last, because they do. They have a bigger portion of your damage.
전멸 기믹이 나오는 줄 수가 3줄 뒤면은 저 같은 경우는 그냥 종해종을 안 하고 점화를 켜버리고 이렇게 3개만 박아요. 박은 다음에 다시 끄고 이렇게 아덴을 채우거든요.
Oh.
기믹 도중에 아덴을 채울 수 있는 패턴이 있고 아덴을 못 채우는 패턴이 있고.
Damn, man. I've never thought. Well, this is why he gets crew fighter all the time. So watch. So again, another. Additionally with the tips that we've been keep talking about. Again, sorceresses gather meter for 24 seconds, and sorceresses do damage for after 15 seconds in a condensed way during ignition. Right now, the reason why he has said again that the raid mechanic, the understanding of raid mechanic, the mastery of raid mechanic is more important than mastery of the class is because, as you guys know, this is just a scarecrow. If you actually go to an actual real raid, there are DRs, damage reduction. There are also mechanics that starts that you have to do mechanics, right? And also there are points where boss becomes invincible, right? So Doomsday, double Doomsday. So Doomsday Igniter, Doomsday, it sounds great. But the thing is, when you do a Doomsday Igniter, Doomsday on when the boss is on DR, that's pretty smudge. And you have seen most people do that, and I probably do that as well all the time. So in this case, if you understand the raid gimmick, and let's say you are 3 bars away before that mechanic itself starting, what he does is he just casts the ignition, casts Doomsday Explosion and then Punching Thunder, and turns the identity buff off on purpose, and then starts filling up for another 24 seconds while the mechanic is happening. Because some mechanics allow you to stack meter, some mechanics don't allow you to stack meter, and some mechanics don't get any damage at all. So based on that point, he adjusts all that meter, he adjusts all that cycle in order for you to get that Cruel Fighter, right? That is the key to get the Cruel Fighter. You know what mechanic's coming up? Within that mechanic, how much damage can you condense utilizing your ignition? Should I just skip ignition right away and build a meter up? Or can I land that full combo in? Can I land Doomsday, Ignition, Doomsday? Can I land all that stuff in? Is my buffs in? All those things keep in mind. You optimize your DPS, and that's how you get Cruel Fighter all the time.
강화 상태가 되면 20%를 추가로 받는 거죠. 110%. 그래서 내가 뭐 기믹 줄수를 다 외우고 있고 이 기믹에서 내가 아덴을 얼마나 채울 수 있는지랑 그런 거를 다 파악을 하고 계신다면은 중간중간 이 마력 해방 말고 마력 강화를 쓰게 되는 상황도 나오실 거고, 아무튼 결과적으로 이 모든 했던 얘기가 결과적으로 레이드 숙련도가 가장 중요한 캐릭인 거를
그렇죠. When his bar happens to be filled up to 70%, and let's say the boss is going into a different phase, and when that is going to be the case, he just uses the igniter bar for having the mana, not the full bar, but the reset bar, is because the tripod itself gives you that 20% extra damage on the Doomsday, right? So when in that particular case, he just uses the ignition bar, uses the bonus damage on Doomsday and all the other skills, and then he uses that mechanic itself to fill up that identity bar, right? So what he does is obviously he calculates how much time is given to him to fill up the meter, or how much time he has been allowed to do the damage, and he uses the igniter, like the igniter bar, accordingly, even if it's on half fill or even if it's on 70% fill, to squeeze all that DPS in, right? And also concluding this has to do with not maybe the class's mastery, but it's also based on the raid mastery.
네, 한 가지 팁을 드리면 이 전멸은 이렇게 아덴이 다 차 있고 내가 종해종을 하려다가 만약 전멸을 써야 될 상황이 나왔어요. 만약 그런 상황이면 종해종을 하지 말고 그냥 점화를 키신 다음에 전멸을 하세요. 그러면은 나머지 이 다른 스킬들을 딜로 박으시고 이 아덴을 끄신 다음에 다시 채우시면 돼요.
So a very good thing that he wanted to talk about Blink was you don't have to worry about utilizing meter for Blink, as in you have to use Blink because if you're going to die while doing DPS, you're trolling, right? When you're casting Doomsday, you're stuck in animation, and then you notice the boss is going to do a big damage to you. most people blink first, but instead, it's better if you just use your ignition and then blink and then utilize that ignition buff to land the next Doomsday, next Explosion, and next Punishing Thunder. So this is one of the better things too. Like, you don't have to be afraid of using blink, because if you're thinking about using a blink, you just use it after ignition, because I think this happens to players who have the process of their skills locked into of doing double Doomsday in one ignition. I think that kind of thought process should be a little bit, you got to think a little bit outside the box and utilize blinks as well in between to condense that, because you can always make a mistake and be about to get hit. But even within that situation, how much DPS can you condense more? And then how much can you push? How much can you push more? So from here, guys, it was super five head tips. Like, there's so many. I'm pretty sure if you guys been wondering, maybe you should just roll back and look at it again, because he has shared us so many cool examples that you guys can master and then increase that damage efficiency, right? So he is done up to this point for this particular skill usage and everything. He wants to talk about a little bit on engravings at the moment for in terms of, you know, building strategies as well. So you guys see this particular build over here. So you see, you know, Grudge, Ignite, Hitmaster, Adrenaline level 3, and then you have All Out Attack, right? So this particular build itself is the usual popular one for Korea, is because whatever synergy you have, whatever that you get, this does the average most amount of damage. And then when you happen to go ancient, have a free level 1 engraving to put in, you have Ether Predator as well.
평균적인 데미지가
right. Sorry, average. The highest average, as in it's the safest build. So continuing, this is more of a popular, getting popularity, right? Utilizing hallucination set is you go Keen Blunt instead, and if you have a lot of crit synergy, preferably 2, but sometimes even if you have 1, you would use Nightmare. But if you don't have any crit synergy, you swap to Hallucination, because if you use Nightmare with no crit synergy at all, what happens is you don't have enough crit rate to have the DPS that is required. The DPS itself goes down a lot. So this is a particular build that you go back and forth on the relic sets to cover initially the things that you need. So the build before, so Hallucination with this particular engraving, the build before, it'll be about the same. But if you go Nightmare and then you have a crit synergy in your team, it is the highest ceiling build that you can have if you have Nightmare. So it's Nightmare with this particular build would be the highest ceiling build of Igniter that you can have. As for, there's also another build where you go Spec Swift, right? You know, people have been asking me about Spec Swift Ignition Source, and is it viable? Well, he does recommend you guys playing Spec Swift if you're a new player, because you move a little faster. You don't need to have a level 10 cooldown gem for Doomsday to do double Doomsday. And since Hallucination has been buffed and you guys have the latest Hallucination, it is easier to keep that stack up for Hallucination, get that buff, and then your lack of crit is covered by the Relic set itself.
너무 느린 건 싫다. 속하시는 분들은 특신을 하시는 게 좋고, 둘 다 사용하고 싶거나 아니면 악몽을 사용하고 싶다라시는 분들은 특치를 가셔야 되고.
So he has concluded again to compile, you know, summarize opinion about him, about the build itself. Spec Crit versus Spec Swift, right? Let's go over to Spec Swift again. In 3 cases, for Spec Swift Ignition Sorceress, you either go if you have a low level gem, low level cooldown gem that doesn't cover the double Doomsday. Second part is if you don't want to use Nightmare, if you want to use Hallucination, if you guys really like the Hallucination Relic set, it would be better off if you choose Spec Swift. And the third point, a more important point one, is I want to play Ignition Sorceress, but I hate being slow. If you think that way as a player for Ignition Sorceress, Spec Swift is your way to go, right? Now for Spec Crit, also another 4 points as well. If you have at least a level 9 Doomsday cooldown gem, along with the supporting of all the other cooldown gems as well, it is good for you to get crit spec, right? Spec crit spec. And for another point is, if you want to see the min max of Ignition Sorceress, you have to go Spec Crit. Now, number third point is if you would like to use hallucination and nightmare, and if you want to use nightmare, you would need to consider using spec crit, right? And the last point is if you don't like adrenaline, you don't want to use adrenaline, you would use spec crit with curse stall as an option too. But adrenaline, he also uses adrenaline as well, but it's a back and forth thing. Chat, this was non-equalized content. So as in a regular raid, you pay, the broshaza, all that stuff. Now he has brought in another stuff. Another important, cool information for you guys is the equalized content. He has brought some stuff, and one of the things that he has brought was the skill set. He has brought some of us some tips of the skill sets that you could have. Some of the skills, the thought process of what you could have when you're playing Inferno content.
이게 보정에서 소서리스한테 가장 중요한 스킬 중 하나라고 생각을 하거든요, 저는. 내가 맘대로 끝말을 들어갈 수가 없거든요, 비보정은.
So as for Sorceress equalized content, which is very interesting, is you take different type of skills. On the equalized skill, you don't use esoteric reaction because you don't get that boost of damage. So you put other skills in which we see reverse gravity. What's important for equalized content is controlling magic addiction and then balance MP. So if you're on obviously, if you guys are in balance MP, you have higher skill cooldown, but you do less damage, right? So within continuing that point, for Nightmare, on non-equalized content, it's really hard to go to balance MP. Why? Because you guys have food, you guys have the support, giving the tripod for the mana heals, and I think the biggest part is food. So it's just essentially it's harder to go to balance MP if you're playing a non-equalized content. But on equalized, you have a limited amount of mana. Also, it's super easy to go to balance MP. So the combination that he has shown you here was he uses the Doomsday Go Ignition, and by the time you use your second Doomsday, you use the Doomsday as if you're in balance MP. So you have that additional cooldown boost on top of it to make your Doomsday come back in only 15 seconds. So within that 15 seconds, your goal is to utilize every other skills to fill the bar up again to get the igniter ready to go. So you're using the Relic sets balance MP and Magic Addiction to squeeze that DPS in real quickly. So technically, if you utilize boundless MP, you can go 15 seconds filling up identity, 15 seconds filling up doing damage, 15 seconds doing you waste. I mean, you gain like that 10 seconds. You actually do so much more damage. You condense it even more. But he hasn't ever seen someone actually do that on a non-equalized content. But on equalized content where you have less mana gain, and then there's no food, etc., they usually use the second Doomsday on the boundless MP so that you can have the next 15 seconds to fill up the identity gauge, and then you DPS burst on 15 seconds again, and back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. That's why they do so much DPS on an equalized content. So as he was saying, as for some of the tips for equalized content, that's what he brought. That's what he did. It's like, oh, it's okay. I know what he's doing. It's okay. I know what he's doing.